We're the Vinyl Verdict. I'm Jacob.
I'm Michael.
And today we're reviewing the Mind Games single by John Lennon from 1973. It was recorded in July and August of that year and released in October, and it was the main single off the Mind Games album that came out. And it's very appropriate with the full remix and all of the bundles and exciting things coming next month. So we wanted to go back before we get too used to those new remixes and listen to this version, the original from 50 plus years ago. And it didn't fare very well as a single. It only hit number 18 in the US and number 26 in the UK. But it's a pretty important staple, I would say, on any Best of John Lennon collection. And it's one of my favorite songs from his solo career. So let's talk about the A-side, Mind Games. This started out as the Make Love Not War song that was recorded maybe as early as, we have a recording of it that was recently released from February 1970, but it's speculated it was written in 69, maybe even shared with other Beatles and everything like that. And then there was an I Promise demo that we got as part of the John Lennon anthology, which shows an intermediate step where he was continuing to work on it or maybe write different songs and then combine them together into this. Always interesting to me that all of the Beatles used a lot of the songs from the end of their writing in 69, 70 on their early solo releases. And 73 was about the borderline where it started to really peter out and the well was running dry and they started to write new things. But it seems like even in 73, a lot of these songs go back to a period they were being written at the end of the Beatles days, and this is no exception.
I was very thrilled with the album and loved every single track on it, and as a matter of fact, listening to it now, it brings back a lot of emotion and memory of the time, and it has a connection to that time in life for me. The sound of John Lennon's voice, if anything, it grows in stature to me. I think it's beautifully arranged, beautifully sung, the vocals just fine, just perfect.
If I was going to criticize it, it's definitely a return to more pretentious, maybe esoteric writing, but Lennon does that better than talking about an issue in the news that week.
Maybe, and when we get into the album, there's some tracks that became representative of, in all his albums, there was a kind of an I'm Sorry Yoko track or something along those lines. I don't mean to be trivial about it, but right down to Jealous Guy or whatever. But this is has a couple of those. But the album has every song is to me is great. But as far as the Mind Game single, it was on the radio. He was back. I think in the major way since Imagine, really.
There was no tour. There was nothing. I mean, I think he did a radio promotion and stuff, but didn't get a ton of that. And I think the song itself, the catchiest song from the album, and it's the only one that was written 3-4 years earlier. So I can see where a lot of his doubts were coming from and everything, because he's using these songs from, the end of the Beatle period still as the lead single from these albums. And I think it does come from a time when he was writing these, piano ballads that still had a little bit of a punch and a lilt to them and would move along. I was comparing it, so it clocks in at 132 BPM. But it's played in halftime, and Imagine's 134. So I do wonder if he was, it was a similar kind of structure in some ways. Obviously, it's a little more guitar-driven, there's more going on, but it is kind of this like pop ballad thing that he's writing in 69, 70, 71, and a lot of the songs on the album are much slower than that. And each verse is obviously very different, very, spent a lot of time on the lyrics, which probably were written around the time of the release because the lyrics are completely different from anything that was on there before. I'm sure everyone has a favorite. Mine is the absolute elsewhere and projecting our images in space and time, and just his accent is so clear and it's such John Lennon writing. Nobody else would write those lyrics. So.
And you always remembered these, and I was just thinking when you were saying that, putting our soul power to the karmic wheel or whatever. I mean, it's just he had a way with words, and it's on display in this song.
But those lyrics, I mean, this is always the thing with the John Lennon like. They're great on an individual basis, you can analyze them, but it is stream of consciousness. Like, there's no closure, there's no story, there's no larger thing there. Each one is kind of its own independent, beautiful sentence. It definitely falls in that. And then something I've never heard discussed with this song particularly, they talk about I Am the Walrus having the shepherd's tone right at the end where it kind of fades out and it descends forever. This song really has that shepherd's tone of just from the minute it starts to the minute it ends, maybe with a little break in the middle eight, but it just feels like it's constantly descending, and it's the illusion of the guitar kind of going up and the bass and everything declining, but it's forever descending in a way that is kind of hypnotizing. And then we flip it over, and on the B-side we have Meat City, which is like night and day, which I think you like to do with these singles. It's a little deceiving almost. I was going to ask you, if you bought this single first, and you hear Meat City and you think, oh wow, he's back. This is a rocker. This is like Plastic Ono Band. It's the only rock song on the album, so I don't know if it's representative of much on there.
Yeah, it's right at the end of the album and just kicks you in the head right when you're going through some pretty pleasant ballads and of various speeds. And this one heavy guitar driven riff and trace it right back to Hamburg. I mean, he's on, and this is Meat City, and he's in the center of it all. It was a real bomb at the end of the album. It's a ripping sound.
Yeah, well, and that's Dave Spinoza, so great lead guitar stuff. It is very reminiscent of some of the stuff he did on Ram, on like Too Many People and everything. It's got that rockabilly kind of riff in certain places, so I love that feel of it. The production on this one is awful, so I'm very excited to see what they're going to do with it on the remastered one, because I always thought that it's just very muddy.
Kind of murky.
Yeah. And this one also goes back to 1971, which was, he had a demo called, Just Give Me Some Rock and Roll that circulated. I think all these songs go back 2-3 years. He's not, the single is not representative of modern work, although he's obviously punching it up and everything. Love all the sound effects in it. I think for 73, that's a little ahead of its time. And each break catches you off guard. It's not the same one. They're always slightly different, so that's pretty cool.
The Baby is my favorite.
John Lennon was convinced that China was the next frontier for rock and roll. He had said that in a couple interviews, and then he's having some fun with that at the end here by saying, I'll go to China. He's come a long way from, if you go carrying pictures of Chairman Mao, this is just 5 years later. The world is shifting in that direction.
He spoke of the time after they were doing songs they wrote in the earlier 70-ish, or at the end of, even in the Beatles still. Didn't seem connected to any of that anymore, without knowing, which is excellent, knowing the history of it and everything. It just seemed like John Lennon was back with a song as always to teach you something, or if it wasn't pure rock and roll, it was a teacher of life. And I mean, he had been in the Beatles about as big as a human being could be, that would be not looked at as something more than human. He was the wise sage in the back of the Beatles with Rain, and that grew into other things, to Strawberry Fields and those kinds of things. And I Am the Walrus. And here he's there's no Beatles, but it's Mind Games, and he's back.
That's true. This is probably the last time he takes on that position as like the professor group leader of the 60s.
I think so. I think there was some of that.
He wears that hat because by Walls and Bridges it's very introspective, which I love, and I think it's more reflective of the Lost Weekend. This is not. This is more songs he already had written. Maybe there's like you said, an apology song, but a lot of these songs predate that. And then he's a house husband. Yeah. So this is really the last time. A lot of the songs on here, when we get into the album, there's a couple songs that do talk about, kind of philosophy and kind of guiding people in a certain way, or commenting on social issues. And yeah, that's pretty much over after this.
The utopian
well, that's not commenting on anything, but thanks for joining us for Mind Games, and we'll do a full review of the album when it comes out, the remastered album, and let us know what you think of this single from John Lennon.